when Range Officer Mike Henderson sarcastically called out, "Any snipers here?" After watching 12 consecutive shooters fail to hit targets at Pine Ridge Shooting Complex, he never expected the quiet college girl in the corner to stand up. Chen had endured dismissive looks and whispered comments from experienced hunters who saw her as just another city kid playing with daddy's money. But when she calmly approached the firing line, shouldered an unfamiliar rifle, and sent a bullet through the crisp Colorado air to strike a target 4,000 meters away, the entire range fell into stunned silence. What they didn't know was that Ghost had just revealed herself. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. 4 hours earlier, Sarah's silver Honda Civic pulled into the gravel parking lot of Pine Ridge Shooting Complex, its engine ticking as it cooled in the thin mountain air. The October morning carried the sharp bite of approaching winter, and the Rocky Mountains stood like ancient guardians against a sky the color of pewter. She had made this drive every Saturday for the past 8 months, always arriving early to avoid the weekend crowds who treated the range like their personal hunting club. Sarah parked in her usual spot near the back fence, away from the main cluster of pickup trucks and SUVs. Through her rearview mirror she caught her reflection. Tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and the kind of slight build that came from too many hours studying rather than physical training. At 22, she looked even younger, especially when surrounded by the grizzled hunters and military veterans who dominated the shooting sports in rural Colorado. The shooting range had become her escape, recommended by Dr. Amanda Torres during one of their sessions at the University Counseling Center. "You need somewhere to process everything," Torres had told her. "Somewhere you can feel in control again." Torres understood, because she had worked with enough students struggling with family trauma to recognize the signs of someone seeking order in chaos. Mike Henderson emerged from the range office, his gray mustache neat, despite the early hour, and his veteran's cap pulled low over weathered features. He had run Pine Ridge for 12 years, building it from a simple trap range into a comprehensive facility that attracted shooters from 4 states. Mike noticed everything and forgot little, but he had learned to respect the quiet ones who came seeking something more than bragging rights. "Morning, Sarah," he called out, his gravelly voice carrying across the parking lot. "Cold enough to freeze the ears off a brass monkey out here?" "Perfect conditions," she replied, shouldering her rifle case. The familiar weight provided comfort, like an old friend's steady presence. Her grandfather's words echoed in her memory. "A rifle is not just a tool, little one. It's responsibility made real." As Sarah approached the range building, she noticed 4 college-aged men unloading expensive gear from a lifted Ford F-150. Their voices carried with the casual arrogance of youth and inherited wealth, discussing their upcoming elk hunt and debating the merits of various premium rifle setups. Jake Morrison stood at the center of the group, his perfectly styled brown hair somehow immune to the mountain wind, wearing hunting clothes that looked fresh from the Cabela's catalog. "I'm telling you, Ryan," Jake was saying to his companion, a stocky young man with nervous energy and thick glasses. "It's all about the setup. My dad's new Weatherby Mark V could drop an elk at 1,000 yards easy." The third member of their group, Brett Collins, nodded enthusiastically while struggling to lift a heavy rifle case. "Jake's been shooting since he was 10, Brett informed Ryan, with the reverence of someone trying to impress. His family owns 3 hunting lodges in Wyoming. The 4th member, Alex Porter, a tall, thin young man with designer outdoor gear, added, "My uncle's guide service uses Jake's family's lodges exclusively. Says they're the best in the region." Sarah walked past them without acknowledgement, but Jake's voice stopped her. "Excuse me, miss," he called out with the kind of condescending politeness that made her skin crawl. "Are you here for the basic safety course? My buddy Ryan here might need some company in the beginner class." Ryan's face reddened, and he shot Jake an angry look. I told you I've shot before, just not much at long range. Sure you have, Jake laughed, then turned back to Sarah. Seriously, though, Mike runs a solid program for first-timers. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Sarah met his gaze with steady eyes that had seen more than most people twice her age. I'll manage, she said quietly, then continued toward the range entrance. Inside the building, Linda Henderson was organizing ammunition inventory behind the counter. Her silver hair pinned back with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades managing both a business and her husband's occasionally blunt personality. She looked up as Sarah entered, offering the kind of genuine smile reserved for regular customers who caused no trouble and paid their bills promptly. "Your usual lane, honey?" Linda asked, already reaching for the sign-in sheet. "Please," Sarah replied, signing her name in neat, precise handwriting. She paid for her lane time and purchased a box of .308 Winchester rounds. The transaction conducted with the comfortable rhythm of routine. The range itself extended beyond a thick glass partition, with 20 individual shooting lanes stretching toward targets at various distances. Most visitors rarely attempted shots beyond 500 yards, content to punch holes in paper targets and feel accomplished about their marksmanship. But Sarah's needs went deeper than casual target practice. She selected Lane 18, the farthest from the college group who were still debating which rifles to use for their demonstration. Her own weapon was a simple Remington 700 that had belonged to her grandfather, its wooden stock worn smooth by decades of careful use. No fancy modifications or high-tech accessories, just solid craftsmanship and meticulous maintenance. As Sarah began her routine of checking her rifle and preparing her shooting position, Mike activated the ranger's loudspeaker system. "Range is hot," he announced. "Eye and ear protection mandatory. Maximum distance today is 200 yards due to wind conditions." Jake Morrison scoffed loudly enough for several people to hear. 200 yards? My grandfather could make shots longer than that with a scope from the 1970s. He was setting up at Lane 3, his expensive rifle equipped with optics that probably cost more than most people's car payments. For the next 2 hours, Sarah worked through her standard practice routine, sending rounds downrange with mechanical precision. Each shot served a dual purpose, maintaining the muscle memory and breathing control that kept her centered, while providing the meditative focus that quieted the chaos in her mind. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove anything. She was simply maintaining skills that defined who she was becoming. The college group, meanwhile, was making considerably more noise and achieving considerably less success. Jake's boasts about equipment and natural talent weren't translating into accurate shots, and his frustration grew with each missed target. Ryan Porter was actually shooting better than his more confident friend, much to Jake's visible annoyance. "This scope must be off," Jake complained, after his 7th consecutive miss at 800 yards. "There's no way I'm shooting that poorly." Mike watched from the observation deck, his experienced eye noting the fundamental errors in Jake's technique: poor breathing control, inconsistent cheek weld, and the kind of muscular tension that came from trying too hard to impress others. But Mike had learned long ago that unsolicited advice was rarely welcomed by young men, convinced of their own expertise. Dr. Robert Martinez arrived shortly after noon, carrying his well-maintained Springfield M1A from his Army days. At 58, he moved with the careful precision of someone who understood his physical limitations but refused to be defined by them. Martinez nodded to Sarah as he passed her lane, noting her relaxed posture and methodical approach to shooting. "How are things going today?" he asked quietly during a break in the firing. "Better," Sarah replied, which was about as expansive as she got regarding her emotional state. Martinez understood that progress came in small increments, measured not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in the gradual rebuilding of confidence and purpose. The afternoon wore on, with Jake Morrison's shooting growing progressively worse as his frustration mounted. He had moved through 2 different rifles, convinced that equipment malfunction was the only possible explanation for his poor performance. Ryan Porter, meanwhile, had quietly improved to the point where he was consistently hitting targets at 600 yards. "I don't understand this," Jake said loudly enough to draw attention from other shooters. "I've been doing this for years. These targets must have some kind of problem with their setup." Mike finally had enough. Walking over to Jake's lane, he examined the young man's shooting position and immediately spotted the problems. "Son, you're yanking the trigger and holding your breath too long," he said in his matter-of-fact way. "Equipment can't fix fundamental technique issues." Jake's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "I know how to shoot," he snapped. "Maybe this place just isn't set up for serious precision work." "Is that so?" Mike replied, his voice carrying the edge that appeared when his professionalism was questioned. "Well, then maybe you'd like to demonstrate some of this serious precision work. We'll set up targets at different distances. See what kind of shooting we're really dealing with here." What followed was a display of expensive equipment producing mediocre results. Jake managed to hit targets at 400 yards with reasonable consistency, but anything beyond that range revealed the limitations of his actual skill level. Ryan Porter surprised everyone, including himself, by proving more accurate than his boastful friend. While Brett Collins struggled with basic fundamentals, other shooters began gathering to watch the impromptu demonstration, drawn by Jake's earlier boasts and curious to see whether he could back up his confident words. The audience only made Jake more nervous, and his shots grew increasingly erratic as the pressure mounted. "Let me try with that rifle," Jake demanded, pointing at Dr. Martinez's M1A. "Maybe something military grade will show what I can really do." Martinez shook his head politely. "This rifle's been customized for my use specifically. Wouldn't be fair to either of us." A local rancher named Tom Bradley, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, spoke up. "Seems like you boys might be trying too hard. Sometimes the best shooting comes when you stop thinking so much about it." Jake bristled at the suggestion. "Easy for you to say. Have you ever tried shooting at these distances?" "Once or twice," Bradley replied mildly, not mentioning his 20 years as a Marine Corps scout sniper. By late afternoon, Mike's patience had worn thin. He had watched 12 different shooters attempt various long-range shots with mixed results. But Jake Morrison's continued complaints about equipment and range conditions had created an atmosphere of frustration that affected everyone present. Finally, Mike's exasperation boiled over. "Any snipers here?" he called out sarcastically, his voice echoing across the range. "Because apparently nobody else can hit the broadside of a barn today." The comment was meant to be rhetorical, a release of frustration rather than a genuine question. But from her quiet corner at lane 18, Sarah Chen set down her notebook and stood up. "Gathering and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Sarah's movement caught everyone's attention immediately. Jake Morrison turned from his position at lane 3, expecting to see another weekend enthusiast stepping forward to embarrass themselves. Instead, he watched a slight woman in faded jeans and a simple fleece jacket approach the firing line with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested serious intent. "I'll give it a try," Sarah said simply, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet range. Jake's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You're joking, right?" He gestured toward his expensive equipment scattered across the shooting bench. "Lady, I've been shooting competitively since middle school, and even I'm having trouble with these conditions today." Brett Collins elbowed his friend sharply, sensing the dismissive tone was about to cause problems. But Jake was too caught up in his wounded pride to notice the warning. "I mean no offense," Jake continued, his voice taking on the patronizing quality of someone explaining something obvious to a child. "But there's wind shear at distance, atmospheric pressure variations, and parallax issues with these scopes that are pretty technical. Maybe you should stick to closer targets until you've got more experience." Sarah didn't respond to his condescension. Instead, she walked to the equipment rack where Mike kept backup rifles for rental. Her fingers moved across the available options with the quick efficiency of someone evaluating tools. rather than admiring craftsmanship. She selected a standard Remington 700 in .308 Winchester, checking the bolt action and examining the mounted scope with practiced movements. "That's a decent rifle," Dr. Martinez observed from his position nearby. "But it's not zeroed for you specifically. Could throw off your accuracy significantly." "I'll adjust," Sarah replied, shouldering the rifle to check its balance and length of pull. The stock was slightly too long for her frame, but she had worked with far worse equipment during her training. Mike moved to the range control station, his curiosity overriding his earlier frustration. In 12 years of running the facility, he had seen plenty of shooters talk a big game, only to flame out when conditions got challenging. But something about Sarah's quiet confidence reminded him of soldiers he had served with in Iraq, people who let their actions speak louder than their words. "What distance you thinking?" Mike asked, his hand hovering over the target control system. 1,000 meters, Sarah said without hesitation. The range fell completely silent. Even Jake stopped his fidgeting with equipment to stare at her in amazement. 1,000. Brett Collins squeaked, his voice cracking slightly. That's over 2 miles. 2.5 miles, actually," Dr. Martinez corrected, his expression growing thoughtful as he studied Sarah with new interest. Few civilian shooters even attempted shots beyond 500 meters. And those who did typically spent years building up to such distances with specialized equipment and perfect conditions. Jake laughed, but it sounded forced and uncertain. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. Nobody makes shots at 4,000 meters without specialized equipment, perfect conditions, and years of training. It's not physically possible with a standard hunting rifle." Mike looked uncertain as well. "Sarah, I've got targets set up to 1,200 meters maximum today. Winds gusting up to 15 miles per hour from the northwest, and visibility isn't ideal, with those clouds rolling in. Can you set something up at 4,000? Sarah asked calmly. "Doesn't need to be a standard target. Just something visible." Mike considered this for a moment, then walked to a storage closet and retrieved a large orange safety cone. "There's a ridge out there at about 4,000 meters, he said, pointing through the range windows toward a distant hilltop. "I could drive out and place this cone on the ridgeline, but honestly, even if you hit in the general vicinity, spotting the impact would be nearly impossible at that distance." "I'll spot for her," Dr. Martinez volunteered, producing a high-power spotting scope from his equipment bag. "Assuming she's serious about attempting this," Jake shook his head in disbelief. "This is crazy. You can't just walk up to a rifle you've never shot before and make a shot that would challenge a military sniper. I mean, what's your background? Where did you learn to shoot?" For the first time since stepping forward, Sarah's expression showed a hint of emotion, a flicker of something that might have been pain or regret. "Here and there," she said quietly. While Mike drove his ATV out to place the cone, word spread quickly through the small shooting community. Linda called her sister at the local diner, who mentioned it to the sheriff's dispatcher, who texted her husband at the fire station. Within 45 minutes, nearly 36 people had gathered at Pine Ridge to witness what most assumed would be an embarrassing failure. Among the newcomers was Maria Santos, who worked as a hunting guide in the area. She had driven over from her ranch after hearing rumors that some college girl was attempting something extraordinary at the range. Maria had served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the army and recognized something in Sarah's demeanor that the civilian spectators missed: the calm focus of someone who had been tested under fire. "You sure about this, honey?" Maria asked quietly, approaching Sarah's position while she prepared her shooting setup. "Lot of folks watching now?" "I'm sure," Sarah replied, making minute adjustments to the rifle's scope. Her movements were methodical and deliberate, each action serving a specific purpose in the complex equation of long-range shooting. Jake Morrison had appointed himself as the unofficial commentator for the gathering crowd. "See, what most people don't understand about extreme long-range shooting," he was explaining to anyone who would listen, "is that it's not just about aim. You've got bullet drop, wind drift, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, temperature variations affecting powder burn rates. The Coriolis effect is negligible at this range and latitude, Sarah said without looking up from her preparations. Bullet drop will be approximately 47 feet with this cartridge and barrel length. Wind drift depends on the consistency of air currents between here and target, which requires reading environmental conditions in real time. Jake's mouth fell open slightly. The casual accuracy of her technical knowledge suggested a level of understanding that went far beyond hobby shooting. Dr. Martinez set up his spotting scope on a tripod, adjusting the focus for the distant ridge where Mike was positioning the orange cone. Through the powerful optics, he could see Mike's small figure moving around the target area, waving back toward the range to confirm placement. "Target set," Mike announced over his radio as he climbed back onto his ATV. "Orange cone on the ridgeline, approximately 4,280 meters from the firing line by GPS measurement." The crowd pressed closer to the observation windows. Some people pulling out phones to record what they expected would be either a miraculous shot or a spectacular miss. Jake positioned himself near Dr. Martinez's spotting scope. Clearly intending to provide expert commentary on Sarah's inevitable failure, Sarah took her position behind the rifle, adjusting the bipod legs for optimal stability on the concrete shooting bench. Her breathing slowed to the deep, controlled rhythm she had learned during specialized training years ago. The familiar process of preparing for a precision shot helped quiet the background noise of anxiety and focus her mind on the immediate task. She pressed her cheek against the rifle stock, finding the consistent cheek weld that would ensure repeatable scope alignment. Through the magnified optics, the distant ridge appeared as a hazy line against the overcast sky. The orange cone was barely visible even at maximum magnification, appearing as little more than a tiny orange dot among the browns and grays of the Colorado landscape. "Winds shifting," Dr. Martinez reported, watching vegetation movement through his spotting scope. "Looks like 12 to 15 miles per hour from the northwest, but it's not consistent. Getting some thermals rising off that south-facing slope." Sarah nodded slightly, her attention focused on reading the environmental conditions that would affect her bullet's 3-second flight time to the target. Wind speed and direction would change multiple times during that brief interval, requiring her to predict and compensate for conditions she couldn't directly observe. She worked the rifle's bolt, chambering a .308 Winchester round. The cartridge was standard hunting ammunition, not the specialized long-range loads typically used for extreme distance shooting, but it would have to suffice. Her finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack without firing. "This is impossible," Jake muttered, but his voice carried less certainty than before. Something about Sarah's professional approach was making him reconsider his assumptions. Through the scope, Sarah watched wind patterns in the grass and vegetation between her position and the target. Years of specialized training had taught her to read environmental signs that casual shooters never noticed. The way different types of plants moved in varying wind speeds, how thermal currents created subtle visual distortions, the effect of changing light conditions on target visibility. She took a deep breath, released half of it, and held. Her heartbeat slowed to the resting rate that would minimize movement between heartbeats. The crosshairs steadied on a point slightly left and above the distant orange cone, compensating for wind drift and bullet drop based on calculations running automatically through her. Trained mind, the crowd held its collective breath as Sarah's finger applied. Final pressure to the trigger broke cleanly, and the rifle bucked against Sarah's shoulder with the familiar recoil of a .308 round. The muzzle blast echoed across the range, followed by immediate silence as people held their breath. Through his spotting scope, Dr. Martinez watched the distant ridge intently, waiting for any sign of bullet impact. 3 seconds felt like an eternity as the crowd strained to see results that were impossible to observe with the naked eye at such distance. "I see dust," Dr. Martinez said suddenly, his voice tight with concentration. Impact. Good grief, she hit it. The cone moved. She actually hit the target. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into a storm of voices. Jake Morrison's face had gone pale, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. Ryan Porter stood with his mouth open, while Brett Collins fumbled with his phone, trying to capture video evidence of something that seemed impossible. Mike's voice crackled over the radio from his position near the target. "Well, I'll be darned." His gravelly voice carried a mixture of awe and disbelief. Direct hit on the cone. Took a chunk right out of the center and knocked it sideways. "I've got the fragment right here in my hand." The crowd exploded into excited chatter, but Sarah simply worked the rifle's bolt to extract the spent cartridge case. She caught the brass as it ejected, examining it briefly before pocketing the case and beginning to make the rifle safe. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Maria Santos asked quietly, her voice carrying the respect of one professional recognizing another. "Various places," Sarah replied, avoiding her eyes as she removed the rifle's magazine and checked the chamber. The answer revealed nothing while suggesting everything. Jake Morrison recovered enough to approach her shooting position, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. That was actually incredible," he admitted. "I mean, I've read about shots like that, but I've never seen anyone actually make one. What kind of training did you have?" The question hung in the air. Sarah's hands stilled on the rifle for just a moment, such a brief pause that most observers missed it entirely. But Dr. Martinez noticed, recognizing the micro-expression of someone confronting unwanted memories. "I should head back to campus," Sarah said, beginning to clean the borrowed rifle with methodical efficiency. "Got a paper due Monday." "Now hold on just a minute," Mike announced as he returned from the target area, holding the damaged orange cone like a trophy. "Young lady, I've been running this range for 12 years. And I have never seen shooting like that from anyone outside active military service." Linda Henderson emerged from the office building, drawn by the commotion. Her practical eyes took in the scene quickly, the gathered crowd, the borrowed rifle, and Sarah's obvious desire to escape the attention her shot had generated. "Mike Henderson," Linda said in the tone wives use when their husbands are about to embarrass themselves, "leave the girl alone. She made her shot, proved whatever point needed proving, and now she wants to go home. That's her business." But the crowd wasn't ready to let the moment pass. Tom Bradley, the former Marine sniper, stepped forward with a knowing look. "Miss, that kind of shooting doesn't happen by accident," he said respectfully. "That's the result of serious training and real experience." Dr. Martinez intercepted Sarah's path to the exit, speaking quietly enough that the crowd couldn't overhear. "Sarah, we should talk sometime. Not here, not now, but soon. That level of skill suggests a story worth hearing." She met his eyes briefly, and he saw something there that confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't just about marksmanship. This was about a young woman carrying experiences that went far beyond what civilian life should require. "Maybe," Sarah replied, then moved toward the door. Jake Morrison wasn't finished, however. His shock at being outshot so dramatically by someone he had dismissed had transformed into genuine humility. "Wait, please," he called after her. "I was completely wrong about you, and I apologize for that. But you have to understand, what you just did is literally textbook impossible, according to everything I've learned." Sarah paused at the door, her hand resting on the handle. Something in Jake's tone, perhaps the genuine humility replacing his earlier arrogance, made her turn back. "Nothing's impossible if you understand the variables," she said simply. "Wind, temperature, humidity, pressure, ammunition consistency, rifle characteristics, shooter stability. Account for enough variables accurately enough, and the bullet goes where you aim it. But how do you learn to account for all those variables?" Ryan Porter asked, speaking up with genuine curiosity rather than challenge. For the first time that day, Sarah's expression softened slightly. "You learn by practicing, by studying, by making mistakes and learning from them, and sometimes by having good teachers who believe in you." Maria Santos nodded approvingly. That sounds like military training to me. Specialized military training. The comment drew approving murmurs from the veterans in the crowd. Sarah glanced at Maria, and a moment of understanding passed between them. The recognition of shared experiences that civilians could never fully comprehend. I had opportunities to learn from exceptional people, Sarah said carefully, and I'm grateful for every lesson they taught me. As she prepared to leave, Jake approached one more time, this time with genuine respect. Would you be willing to give me some pointers sometime? Real pointers, not the stuff I thought I knew? Sarah considered the request. Learn the fundamentals first. Breathing, trigger control, consistent position. All the fancy equipment in the world won't help if you don't master the basics. That's exactly what my instructors told me in the Corps, Tom Bradley added with a smile. Fundamentals beat fancy gear every time. Mike Henderson stepped forward with the damaged cone. Sarah, I'd like to keep this as part of our range history, if you don't mind. Maybe inspire some of these weekend warriors to focus more on skill than equipment. She nodded. That's fine. Just don't make a big deal out of it. Too late for that, I'm afraid, Linda said with a gentle smile. By tomorrow morning, everyone in 3 counties is going to know about the college girl who made the impossible shot. As Sarah finally made her exit, Dr. Martinez followed her to the parking lot. You know, he said quietly, whatever you're carrying from your past, you don't have to carry it alone. There are people here who understand. Sarah looked back at the range building, where excited conversations continued about what they had just witnessed. For 8 months, she had come here seeking solitude and escape from memories that haunted her. Instead, she had found a community that valued skill over appearance, substance over show. I know, she said finally. Maybe that's why I keep coming back. She climbed into her Honda Civic and drove away into the Colorado afternoon, leaving behind a range full of people whose assumptions had been thoroughly challenged. The quiet college girl they had dismissed had reminded them that true capability often comes in unexpected packages, and that the most dangerous mistake is underestimating someone based on appearances. Jake Morrison stood in the parking lot, watching her car disappear down the mountain road. I'm never going to live this down, am I? He said to Ryan. Probably not, Ryan replied with a grin. But maybe you learned something valuable today. Yeah, Jake admitted. I learned that talking a big game and backing it up are 2 very different things. Inside the range, Mike Henderson placed the damaged orange cone on a shelf behind the counter, where it would serve as a reminder of the day when quiet competence defeated loud arrogance. Linda stood beside him, shaking her head with amusement. You know what I love about this job, Mike said. Just when you think you've seen everything, someone comes along and surprises you. That girl's got a story, Linda observed. One she's not ready to tell yet. Maybe she doesn't need to, Mike replied. Maybe the shot says everything that needs saying. As the sun began to set over the Rocky Mountains, casting long shadows across Pine Ridge Shooting Complex, the day's events settled into the kind of legend that would be retold for years to come. The story of the quiet college girl who stepped forward when no one expected it, made an impossible shot with borrowed equipment, and reminded everyone that true skill speaks louder than expensive gear or confident boasts. Sarah Chen drove back toward campus, her hands steady on the wheel, her mind already returning to the comfortable routine of classes and study sessions. The attention would fade eventually. The story would become exaggerated with each retelling. But for one afternoon, she had allowed herself to be seen for who she really was beneath the quiet exterior. And sometimes that was enough. The end. Up next, 4 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss what's coming. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot to us.